guys, just Rise here, and today I'll be talking about the concept of passing by reference versus passing by value. So this is a key computer science concept that is particularly important to understand if you're using languages like C++, right? But today we'll be doing our examples using Python because it aligns with the language that I've taught so far. So, okay, so first of all, I'll assume that you have basic knowledge of functions, right? If I define a function f, right, that takes in a parameter x and a print, let's say x times x, then I'll expect you to know what happens when you call f of 3 and f of 5, right? So if I go ahead and call this, then you should be able to understand why this result is 9 and 25, right? So if you are not familiar with the concept of functions, then I invite you to visit my functions, my Python fundamental tutorial on functions, because yeah, that's essential. So if you do understand functions, then that's great. So let's go ahead and talk about pass by value. So we start off by talking about a concept known as passing by value. And to really illustrate what's going on, let's create a variable y and set it to equals to value 2. Okay, so I go ahead and call f of y, right? So can you guess what the output of it is going to be? Okay, so I'll give you a moment, right? And let's go ahead and run it. And if you run it, you see the answer is 4. And if we had set y to be another value, let's say 5, right? Then naturally, the output will be different. So let's go change it back to 2, right? So f of y, right, will be f of 2. We're passing in the value of 2 into the function. Sorry. We're passing the value of y, right, into the function. And the value of y is 2, so we're passing in 2 into the function. X takes on the value 2, right? And then we print x times x, which is 4. So there's no doubt about what's going on over here yet. But what happens if we try something like inside the function, right? We try something like x equals to 5. Okay, then what if we print y after that? Can you guess what the output is going to be, right? So if you had guessed 2, right, you'll be correct. And if you had guessed 5, it'll have been a close guess. And I can understand why you think it's 5, because you think that you pass. So first of all, let's debunk the misconception why 5 is wrong, right? Because if you pass, you may think that passing in y into the function x and y are like the kind of the same variable, and then you set x equals to 5, you're setting y equals to 5 also, but that's actually incorrect, right? Because when we pass in the value of y into the function, right, it reads the value of y, and the value of y goes into the function. Y itself does not go into the function, right? Yeah, y is still, so y is the value of y is the value of y is like read from the variable y, and the value is the one that's passed into the function. So that's why this is known as passing the value of y into the function f, right? So if you print before and after, right, you see that the value of y does not change at all, even though we set x equals to 5 in the function. So if I go ahead and illustrate what this means in on a diagram, so perhaps this will help a little bit. So if we have the function, right? So okay, so first of all, we have a container, right? We have a variable, which is like a container of information storing the value 2. Okay, so that's so it's storing the value variable 2. Then when we have the function f, right? F that takes in the parameter x, right? When we call f of y, right, what happens is that we read, the first thing we do is we read value of y. We read the value of y first, right, which is 2. So we take 2 out, and 2 goes into the function. So it essentially translates to become f of 2, right? Yeah, for all you know, right, you could have also put f of like, for example, 3 times y, right? And then you read the current value of y, and hence it'll be we'll be calling f of 6, right? So if we go ahead and change this, f of 3 times y, then what's this 3 of times y doing is reading the current value of y and then multiplying it by 3, right, which gives us 6, and passing it into the function. So the point over here is that when you call the variable y like that, right, is reading the variable, and then is passing that value of the variable into the function, right? Y itself remains untouched. So when x, essentially we set x equals to whatever value we passed in. So in that case, x equals to 2 at the first line of code over here, right? Because the value we passed in was 2. Then we set x equals to 5. So this x was a container, right, that contained 2. But now because we set x equals to 5 in the function, right, x became 5. And after that, we exit the function, right? The variable x is completely destroyed, right? And y, you see that y, the value of y has not changed at all, because when we're passing it into the function, we just read the value of y, right, and pass it into the function, right? Y was just sitting there, and when you asked y for the value, it just said, I have the value 2, here you go, right? Take the value, do whatever you want with it, but I'm not, my value, y is like, my value of 2 has not changed. I'm just letting you make a copy of it, right? I'm just letting you read the value. So that's what it means by passing by value. Okay, so passing by value is perhaps the more intuitive behavior that you might expect Python to, right? But what is also possible, right? So you may be asking, okay, so does all functions behave like that, right? If I pass a list into a function, does it also pass by value? And the answer is actually not quite. So yeah, so let's define another function g, right? And let it take in a list, take in a variable il. Okay, so okay, maybe I should just call it my list, right? And let's say inside the function g, right? Inside the function g, I have my list dot append 3. All right. So if I go ahead and call the function, right? Then if I go ahead and call the function, so let's say just to simply demonstrate the behavior of the function, first of all, let's print my list before appending 3 and print my list after appending 3. Then if I call the function g, right, with some list passed in, then you'll see that you have 1, 2, and then you have 1, 2, 3, right, for the before and after, because in between we have appended 3. Yeah, but okay, so this is expected as this is just this comes from our knowledge of functions previously as well, right? Nothing new at the moment, right? But let's try something. Let's try to mirror what has happened above. Okay, so let's create a list, right? And call it L, and set it to equals to 1 and 2, and then let's go ahead and print L before passing it into the function, and then we print L after passing into the function. And when we call the function g, right, we pass in the list L. So we go ahead and run this, right? Will you expect this print statement? The first print statement naturally would just be 1, 2, right? 1 and 2 is the elements of the list. But what happens for line 17? Would it be 1, 2, 3? Right? In fact, you see that it is 1, 2, 3. And that might seem a little weird. So you see that if we go and call g twice, right, then our function actually updates the values of the list, right? It has actually appended 3 to the list two times because we called the function twice. So the difference between above and below, right? So if you haven't already guessed it, right, below we're actually having passed by reference, right, which is the whole point of this video. So above, the example above over here, right, this chunk is example of passing by value, and the example below is actually passing by reference. So you see that when we pass L into the function, right, the function actually modified the parameter that we passed in. And yeah, so what's going on over here, right? Why for the above part our function did not modify the value of the variable we passed in, but in the bottom, right, our function did modify the variable we're passing in. So what's going on over here, right? This is known as pass by reference. So what is pass by reference? It takes it'll be useful to take a step back first and understand a bit of computer science fundamentals about how the computer works. Okay, so if you go yeah, so if you look into the memory, right? If you look into the memory, right? So we have created a variable. So this is our computer memory, a memory chunk, right? So this, we created a variable y and we stored the value 2, right? And let's just say we just label it y like that. Then we did some other stuff with our programs. We called it, then we also created another variable, a list, right? L, right? And we stored the values 1 and 2 in the list. So, so what happens when we call, what happens in the first case? In the first case, when we pass by value, right? When we pass by value, right? What happens was that when we pass f of y, right? F of y went to read. Y is over here. We went to read the value of y. We read the value of y and put it back into the code, right? And it was essentially calling f of 2. But in the second case, right, when we've actually passed by reference. So what is passed by reference, right? When we call g of L, right, we're actually passing in the reference. Sorry for the thunder. We're actually passing in the reference to L. So what this means is actually we're passing in the location, the memory location of L. So previously we passed in the value, we read the value of y, right? But in this case, we actually pass this L over here is actually the location, / reference to L. So over here, there's some, over here where L is stored in memory, right? There's some location, maybe like it will be, usually we denote it hexadecimal, right? There'll be some location of L, and we're actually passing in the location to L. So when we call G of L, we're actually calling G of, we're actually passing in the reference to the variable L, which is why when we call the append, right, we're actually looking at this memory location, right, and appending to the list stored at that memory location, which is why this memory chunk, right, was actually updated by the function when we appended 3 to the list stored at that location. Okay, so yeah, so that's the I hope that's clear enough, right? When we call a function and pass in by value, we're reading the value of the variable and we're taking that value and passing into the function. But when we pass a variable by reference, we are passing in the memory location of that variable. And this memory location, right, we're passing in the memory location of the variable into the function. And now the function has the memory location of our data, of where the data lies. And when we modify the data at that memory location, right, and we exit out of the function, right, if we print L again, right, L, they look over here, and because we have modified the data at the location, right, when we print L, we get 1, 2, 3. So when we pass in a variable by value into the function, it does not get modified, right? Because we're kind of copying the value and passing into the function. Yeah, but when we call a function and pass by reference, right? We're letting the function, right, have direct access to the location where the data is stored, right? The location where this 1 and 2 was stored, right? And it chose to the function added 3 to the list, right? So it added 3 to the back of the list. And now when we read the data at that location, then we are going to see 1, 2, and 3. So yeah, so right now you may be asking when do we see pass by values and when do we see pass by references, right? The short answer is that pass by reference occurs when you're passing in an object into a function, right? When you're passing in an object, and what is an object, right? It's an instance of a class. And pass by value occurs when we're passing in primitives, right? So what are primitives? They are like integers, booleans, floats, and yeah, those in a sense, the yeah, primitives are these kind of primitive variables. So for Python, right, in the special case of Python, right, it's actually a bit more nuanced. Yeah, but I won't go into that. But if you study C++, then you realize that if you study C++, then the distinction will be quite clear, because when we define objects, right, we know the variables that are actually storing pointers to the objects. So pointers are the references, and yeah, but I won't go into too much details about that. Okay, lastly, before we end off, right, I also want to okay, so I also want to talk about what is memory location thing. Right now, I denoted with this x0, x1234. 0x just tells you that it's hexadecimal. So if I go ahead, right, I can interact with the console over here. I can print the value of L, right? So how do I find the memory location of L, right? I can do print ID of L. So ID will actually tell me the memory location. So you see this number over here is currently in decimal form, right? If I want to see the hexadecimal, I just put hex of that. So just now I use 0x1234, right, to illustrate an example of the reference, but in reality, right, this is actually the memory location that we're passing in. So if we go ahead and print ID or hex of ID of my list over here, right, then we can see that yeah, we can see that so let's go ahead and print the hex of ID of list, of the list L also, right, and we go run it. Then we can see that they are the same location, right? So this is inside function, we see that memory location, outside function. See that both inside the function and outside the function, right, they have the same memory location. Whereas if we did the same thing for here, right, let's go ahead and print inside function hex of ID of X, right, and then over here we print outside function hex of ID of Y, then we see that this one, right, okay, actually there's a small difference. If I do it after, then you see that it's different, right? So yeah, so you see that for the function of passing it by value, right, your okay, so if I pass in a variable into the function by value, right, and then I print the address of that value I passed in, right, then you see that outside the function is 700, right, and inside the function is 760 for value, right? You see that the reference is referring to two different variables, but when I do it for the pass by reference, right, even though I append to a list like that, right, you see that the memory address still stays the same, and hence passing by reference, right, my list, right, and L are both pointers to the same object. All right, so yeah, that's briefly the difference between pass by reference and pass by value.